And now it's the Little Italy podcast and Deborah Kobylt live.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our shows today. And joining me is my dear friend, Ann Potenza. Thanks for being here, Ann.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
You got this little sash. I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. We'll have you stand up. You are here today to talk about lots of things, but most recently, you are the producer and the creator of this incredible play that's opening in North Hollywood for Women's History Month, The War of Roses, the women, the voices, the vote. And it's about the suffragette movement. Oh gosh, what an incredible play. Can't wait to talk to you about that.
Thank
You are also a well-known events planner here in Los Angeles. Can we think the San Gennaro Festival? You also have a very famous first cousin, Jimmy Kimmel. Lots to talk about in your life, Anne. But let's first start about this magnificent play, please.
Thank you. I am so excited. This is a show about, and I like to think of myself as a curator because it's actually the voices from 19 suffragists that worked so hard to get the women the vote. And this, we really go on a whole journey from the beginning, from Abigail Adams, one of our second first lady, who is her famous letter, Remember the Ladies, to her husband, John Adams, all the way through to when the vote was passed, which a lot of people don't even know that the whole process of how it happened. And this show is just, it's educational, it's inspiring, it's fun, it's serious, it has everything. I'm like so excited to bring these women's voices to life again.
And you're wearing that sash. Can you show us a little bit what that says?
I am. Votes for Women. A very famous sash that the women wore daily when they were trying to get the vote. So this is something that you see all the old suffragist pictures and wearing it in honor because they got us the vote and there's still a lot more to do with women's rights. So we're not done. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this show is to let people know it's also a get out the vote event. It's to get people motivated to realize how important the vote is. For your one vote means so much. You will know one vote can decide everything. And this is about just being active in the political rights that we have and to express them and to never take them for granted. So there's a lot of work to do still.
Well, I like that you're bringing these women and their stories to life because let's face it, when people have passed on and we just show up at the booth and vote, no one's really thinking that hard about, we weren't able to do that. There was a time we just didn't have the right to do that. And because of these 19 women you're highlighting, we can. And it's great that, you're bringing them to modern day life. We're going to talk about, as you said, Abigail Adams. We've got Phoebe Burns, Ida B. Wells, and of course, Susan B. Anthony. Everybody knows Susan B. Anthony, but what about some of the other women? Do they know some of their names? Do they know who they were and why they did this? Let's highlight some of them, would you, Anne?
Well, I'll tell you, I first thought about this show because our 100th anniversary of the vote was in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. And of course, we all know where we were at that time. So I was doing some research and started learning about these women. And myself, as active as I am, I was perplexed that I didn't know a lot about these women and what they did and what they got us that we take for granted now, whether it's married women's rights, whether it was child labor laws, union hours. I mean, there's so much that they fought for, not just to vote. It was because there were issues that at the time it was the man's vote or their husband's vote that would represent, but half the country was women. So very important. A lot of these women were also part of the abolitionist movement. They were part of getting the 13th Amendment passed and the 14th Amendment passed. And then finally, when we got to the 19th Amendment. So they were active from when to get slavery, to free the slaves, to getting the Black men, the right to vote. A lot of people were then involved, and a lot of those people then moved on to help. There was just one demographic that was left out, and that was the women. So we finally got it in 1920. So that's how I heard about these stories. And once I started thinking, I'm like, these words, these people, these women, they work so hard. And that was when we had the 2020 election. It's like, our vote matters. Our vote counts. It should be. These women wish they could vote. Some of them never got the chance to vote. And I really felt if people understood what this means to be an American, to be able to exercise your right to vote, every single person, then you can't just sit on your couch watching TV and eating bonbons. You got to get out there and do something.
Okay, you caught my interest a moment ago when you said women and their husbands. Talk to me for a moment about that. We were their possession, and right?
We were. It's funny. There was one of the speeches is about married women's rights. And they thought at the time that women had the right because men would be able to put their property in the name of the wife, but it didn't mean that she got the property. If he should die, it really was just a tax shelter. So in one of our speeches, you will hear about widowed women who maybe came to a marriage with property. If the husband died, they only got 30% of the property. So if the husband had children from a previous marriage, they would actually get 2/3 of the property after the husband died. So a lot of women were left as paupers after their husband died because they didn't have any married property rights. So, and I must say, and we could talk about it a little bit later when we talk about why it's called the War of Roses, but there were a lot of people who did not think we needed the vote. A lot of women were content with their husband casting the vote for them until they started realizing that we have a lot to say. There's a lot that women can bring from their experience, what they've done to actually share and be part of the conversation in the laws that we make in this country. So that's why it was very important to have the women's voice.
Well, it's like the Equal Rights Amendment. A lot of women were saying, why do we need that? I'm thinking, what? What side are you on? Please. It's shocking to me.
And to add on to that, just to know, the Equal Rights Amendment has not been passed yet. Right now, it's in Congress, because you'll learn with the amendments, there's a certain amount of time for an amendment to be ratified before it can become law. And the Equal Rights Amendment, one of our suffragists that speaks, Alice Paul, she actually introduces it in the 20s. Many women since the 20s have been trying to get it passed. We are working with the ERA coalition, but it still has not become an official amendment. So when I say there's still work to do, there is. So that's part of what we want you to leave here with, like, oh, we're not done yet. There's still more work.
No, it's incredible. All right, so let's talk a little bit about. Let's start with Abigail Adams, and then I'd also like to talk about Ida B. Wells and the work that she did. Let's start with those two, can we?
Okay, yes. Well, most people would not consider Abigail Adams an official suffragist, but she really starts. I mean, our country started in 1776, and there's a letter, famous letter, Remember the Ladies, and that's what she will be sharing. And without giving it all away, she was very active with her husband, our founding father, John Adams, in political affairs. You know, of course, women were not in the forefront, but she was a very close political advisor. And when he went off to get our country, when they all met for the Declaration of Independence, she actually writes a very important letter to her husband to remember the ladies. So she, even back then in 1776, it's nice to see a husband and wife where they write to each other, and the husband's open to listening, and he does in his way. And she's one of the first forefronts. And when she became at first she was the second lady, and then she became the first lady, she was very, very involved with being a political advisor with her husband. Probably behind the scenes, you know, nobody could see her face, but a lot of uncredited work, I will tell you that.
See, what I think is important is these people now, and I said it before, they're coming to life for us. Very often when historical figures have passed and then a century or more goes by, they're just someone that you read about, or a photo that you see, or a sketch of someone, and they almost don't appear real. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
They don't appear real, and now they're real. We get to see, as women, as young girls, we get to see, oh, she was just like me, you know, and she was fighting for something too, and that's why I can do it, because of her. Such an important play. So I'm just thrilled. All right, let's talk about bring somebody else into this, because I want people to know who we're going to be seeing.
It won't be the same. I will credit, and we do have one of our British suffragettes, because people don't realize the suffragettes it started in England before it came to America. And in America, they were known as the suffragists. Now, in England, there was a little bit more of a militant way to get people's attention. So it was something that the American women used more law and more not subdued. They used a little bit different means. But Emmeline Pankhurst was the leader of the English suffragettes, and she's one of the first ones. She was arrested many times, and some of our American suffragists actually went there and learned from her. And you'll hear from one of the American suffragists that actually learned about the women's movement from her and came back to America, and then was the first, and then wound up going to lead the first picket protest in front of the White House. She also got arrested. Okay, this is the main thing, and this also goes with Susan B. Anthony. What you will hear from in this show, you will hear from some of the women, such as Emmeline and Susan B. Anthony and some others, who are actually arrested for exercising their right to vote or trying to get to vote. They were literally thrown in jail. They had hunger strikes. They just were ridiculed. They were jeered. They were abused in so many ways. It wasn't easy. Like, it's nice and cushy, we think of it now, but these women really worked hard and they suffered for us so that people would know how important this was. So I admire these women, and we hear their words as they're trying to stand in front of their judges and juries, basically asking, why can we get the vote?
You know, hasn't that always been our condition? The female condition, you know, that famous play Lysistrata, right? Mm-hmm. Where the women would barricade themselves when the men went off to war, saying, hey, you're not even going to get to see us until you address this, this, and this, right? And that was back in the Greek times, I believe. Yeah. And, you know, for centuries and centuries, we've had to fight for everything we get. And this is why this is such a powerful story that you've written.
Thank you. Could I add on that note with what you just brought up? The reason this is called the War of Roses is not because during the 100 years when we were fighting for the right to vote, the War of Roses was literally between the people who wanted the vote and the people who did not. And the suffragists, why I'm wearing the yellow flower, the suffragists, they all wore or had yellow roses, which I have here, that represented, we want the vote. And then there were antis, people who did not want the vote, and they were represented by the red roses. So we literally have the War of Roses. As beautiful as these roses are, there's so much behind them. There was a war of who would win. But the thing is, it wasn't a war of violence, like no guns, no battles, no killing each other. It was literally a war of logic, determination, persistence, reasoning. And in Harry Chapman Catt's memoir, Victory, How the Women Won It, she talks about how the women won the war. And it was literally through diplomacy.
It's a great lesson for us to never give up anything that we want and need and deserve, just as citizens, right? And thank goodness that we're citizens, right? And all of this is so important. And so much is still happening around the world where women don't have rights. And if they speak out, not only will they be put in jail, but they could be executed. So there's so much to learn here. Talk to me about Ida, because she's particularly interesting to me.
Perfect segue, because what she is going to talk about, her speech is one she gave often, and it's literally about lynching in America. So Ida B. Wells, African-American woman, she was an educator. She was actually one of the founding members of the NAACP. She was a women's rights activist. And at the time when lynching was happening too frequently to the African Americans in America, her speech is about how enfranchisement will help stop lynching, because many times the excuse of the people who committed those murders was that they were killing this Black man because he disrespected a white woman. And it was like using the woman as the excuse as to why we're killing. Like, it was, a lot of this happened after the Civil War, even though Black men, there was no slavery and Black men were able to vote, there still were ways that the Confederates, the Southerners that didn't like that, were still trying to find ways to keep the Black men and Black people from being part of our system and being able to vote. And that's when you see the rash of lynching start to happen in the South and other terrible things that happen. So Ida B. Wells, she was brilliant woman, journalist. She wrote newspapers. One of the things you don't realize, so many of these women that we're highlighting, they were all educators or journalists or writers, and they started newspapers, and they just, like, there were only a few vocations that women were allowed to hold in that time period. Some of them was being a teacher, being a caretaker, or a nurse. So what I really enjoyed finding out was so many of these women, the writing, and that's why it exists today and will be forever, that to hear exactly what their opinions were and what they noticed in that time period. So that's why Ida B. Wells is a fantastic person that we get to highlight, and she's done so much since in her influence of us nowadays, and for African Americans and everyone. And what's cool about her, she was the president of the one of the Chicago's women's societies, and she was invited to be part of the 1913 procession in Washington, D.C., which is the big women's rights procession. Think about that, 7 years before you even got the vote. And there was still, now, okay, even though this is for women, there was still a segregation with the Southern Black women who did not want the rights of the Southern white women, did not want the rights of the Black women. So we go through all this segregation. First, it's between the vote. And now it even comes down to, when we think we're all women, it wasn't. There was literally a split between Black women and white women. But Ida was invited to be part of the procession. And some of the leaders were afraid that the Southern white women were not going to be part of this procession, and they weren't sure if they should have Ida march with them. They wanted her to stay with the city, and it's a true story. She wound up standing back, and she marched with the people that she was supposed to represent. So she's a strong woman. Obviously, even within the color, the color spectrum that we have to go through, there was still always work to be done, even between the women.
Talk to me about how the men were feeling about all this. Clearly it passed, but was there a lot of pushback in the beginning?
There was. When you research a lot of these women, they went on, like in the procession in 1913, there was also some processions through certain towns where the majority of the people who were in the streets were men who harassed the women, jeered at them, threw stuff, like terrible things. It was just not accepted by most of America. Think about this. This took years, but I will say there were many men who were part of this movement. So it's not that it was like the women against the men. No, it was the people who believed in equal rights for all and the people who did not. And that's how this war between the yellow roses and the red roses. So men were just as much a part of it. And one of our narrator for this show is actually a very special man, Frederick Douglass, and he is an African American man who escaped from slavery and was the very first and only Black man who was at the Women's Convention in 1848. And he actually got up at the very first convention and said, even though he had the right to vote as a Black male, he said, I cannot exercise my right to vote as a Black male if the women don't have the right to vote. So we have a Black male who was here this whole path. So it was only right that he is actually being represented throughout the whole show as a narrator, as the through line to introduce these women and tell a little backstory. So yes, real men are feminists too.
Oh, that's beautiful. So the play is when and where, so people know. And then we're going to get a little bit into your personal life. Go ahead.
You got it. The play is March 1st and 2nd at 7 p.m. The curtain goes up at the El Portal Theater in North Hollywood. Tickets are available online at thewarofroses.com. And if you go on there, you'll notice that you can buy tickets for yourself. They start at $19 for the 19th Amendment. And if you can't go, but you want to support, there's actually, you can click and you can help send a student by just putting roses in the code, because we have given a large invitation to the sororities at UCLA and USC, because they are a perfect target audience that we want to come here. They're young women who are part of a sisterhood. They're being educated, they're getting involved. And so we've invited the sororities to come. So if any tickets are donated, we will give them to some of the students. And so we're very excited to share this. And we hope that we'll be able to continue to share this with even more after this too. But these are the only 2 shows for now. So please come and join us.
Yeah, boy, I could see this having a run on Broadway, but you know, we'll have you back when that happens, Anne.
Thank
so that'll
you.
Be just amazing.
Actually, but I will throw in, because they are my sisters, even though I'm not affiliated with it, there is going to be a musical about the suffragists on Broadway in spring. So they got the music and we got the speeches. So I'm not affiliated, but I'm a supporter, and I want everyone to know about that if they are in New York. So there you go.
Women supporting women. I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it. Yeah, but that's what you're all about. Okay. And I just want to say a little footnote about Anne Potenza. That is what Anne is all about. And yeah, terrific. So you are very involved in the Italian American community here in Los Angeles, as I am. Let's very briefly talk about where you grew up and how you ended up out here and all that kind of good stuff.
You got it. I am an Italian American, 3rd generation. My family came from Southern Italy through New York, through Ellis Island. So all my grandparents were born here. But we grew up typical Italian family where grandma and grandpa were the center of our life. My aunts and uncles were like second parents. My cousins were like my relatives. And we grew up in New York. And then my father was a police officer for the NYPD. And when he retired, we were still young. I have 2 younger sisters. And at the time, he decided he needed to still work. So he was looking to raise his daughter somewhere a little safer than where we were. So we moved out west. We took my grandparents, Sal and Edith, to Las Vegas with us. And we'll talk about Edith. We took them, and we're sorry we took them away from our aunts and uncles and cousins, but they all soon followed. And yeah, they followed, and everyone had a good raising. I was raised in Las Vegas, went to UNLV, and then after graduating college, I came out to LA, and now I'm excited. All my whole family's out here. So we've all little by little migrated from Italy to New York, to Vegas to LA. So we're all here now.
Wow. So you grew up the daughter of a New York City cop. What was that like?
I did. The funny thing is, my dad he was not the typical Italian cop that you would think. He literally was like a professional maitre d', because he was one of the cops for 20 years. He walked the beat. He walked the neighborhood. He liked being part of the community, which I think is so important. Think about where he was. So he knew everybody. And it wasn't about giving tickets to if a mom had kids in the car. He never wanted a kid to see their mom going through that. He was more of a caring community person, and he took that with him through his whole life. And he wound up having a couple of careers after that. So he's someone that I love as a leader. So he wasn't the typical tough cop. He literally was a softie and a sweetheart, and was kind to everyone. Good man.
What's your greatest memory of growing up Italian in New York with all the relatives? Because those of us who had the experience of growing up back east with the Italian relatives is really something that to this day is still being written about, right?
I know.
So what was your typical Sunday like?
You know what? We were in Brooklyn. We were born in Brooklyn. A lot that has to do with Brooklyn. It's just like one of those great migration places. And I will say it was dinner with my grandparents. My grandma, Edith, which is my middle name, I was named after, and I know you were named after as well, after your mom, right, Deborah?
My mother's name was Edith. Yeah.
Yes.
And I remember growing up thinking, what a weird name. And now I just love it, right?
I know.
One of my favorite poets is named Edith. And, it's just a beautiful name. So go ahead. So
so Grandma Edith was the typical grandma, had giant pot of, we called it gravy. I know there's a big debate whether it's sauce or gravy on the stove. And we would go by and we would dunk the bread as she's preparing all day Sunday with her gravy. Because as a family, we were going to have, you know, macaroni and meats and everything. You know how that is, everyone coming there. And the best part, I would say, is getting the bread and dunking it in the gravy before dinner. Like, there's just something about that simple snack that she would always be thrilled that we did.
Because it's delicious and it simmers. I mean, people, it simmers for hours. We're not talking taking it out of a jar here.
Right.
It simmers for hours. And then when you dunk the bread absorbs the different flavors of the sauce. We called it sauce also.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like it. You know, I have a Polish husband. He still doesn't get it. He's like, wait, you would dunk bread into what? And why is everybody taking food from somebody else's dish?
Right.
Like, because you're supposed to.
Right.
And
there's something about that. And like I said, everyone was always invited to everyone was welcome in like I equate as just Italian household. Everyone was welcome, whether it was the neighbor, whether it was a friend. No one, you know, didn't have a place. So my grandma was that. My grandpa was great. He was like an artist. He's the one that got me in, like, very interested in films and photography, because he would always be making creative things in the basement. So when grandma was cooking, grandpa would be showing us like movies on the basement cellar walls, and we'd be watching Beadle Bailey, our old films, because he worked for Technicolor, and he would have like the real film, and I learned how to splice film. So that, I think, is inherent. That brought me to like that part of LA where I'm like, I love the creative side of what we do in this town, just bringing the imagination to life. So that's my biggest like influence from my childhood, would be my grandma and grandpa. Being there is what I equate being Italian to, you know.
Did you ever think you'd be in the business? Because you're a well-known events producer here in Los Angeles, and cousin Jimmy Kimmel. Did he show signs of being a showman that he is today? Because he's incredible and such a nice guy too. I know, you know, you guys would play as little kids. What was Jimmy like?
He's great. So I'm the oldest of 9 grandchildren from the grandma and grandpa I was telling you about, and Jimmy's second. So he was like my first little brother. We're a year apart, and so we grew up the same way, which is why later on we talk about he started the Feast of San Gennaro with Doug DeLuca and Frankie Compatelli in LA, because we were basically recreating what we experienced as kids. So Jimmy was normal kid growing up. Show business was not in our family, but humor was, having a good time. He has a sense of humor of my grandpa, who would be quiet. Jimmy was fairly quiet, but there was always something going on in his mind. And he would always record. He would always find the humor in things that were someone else wouldn't. Like, my mother is the loud Brooklyn lady of like his Aunt Chippy, and he always got a kick out of the interaction between my mom and dad, and he would find humor in it, where as a daughter you're just like, I really wish my parents wouldn't be, you know, yelling like that, but he thought it was funny, which he actually has brought all that to his work. So Jimmy is also, he was part of, we were, as kids, we'd be in my grandpa's basement doing the creative stuff. So we had that same foundation of family and creativity and humor and fun and a lot of food.
Yeah. Oh, that's just wonderful.
So I'm really proud. He's just worked, you know, just kept working, and he's where he is today because of it.
And a good guy too. Tell me how San Gennaro started here in LA, because everyone's still talking about it. Everybody wants it to come back. We know it's a lot of hard work though, people.
I know.
You know, for those who don't know, it's a big deal back east, the San Gennaro Festival. Wow.
Exactly.
So talk to us about it starting there, and talk to us about bringing it here. And might you bring it back? Go ahead.
Sure. Well, like I said, Jimmy and Doug DeLuca and Frankie Compatelli, they were part of the founding board. Jimmy and Doug worked together on the Man Show. And like I said, they would create their own little, there were a lot, believe it or not, there are a lot of Italian transplants from New York that live in LA, but we didn't realize that. And when Jimmy first started, they found that there were a lot of Italians that were working together. So they would start having their own little San Gennaro fun nights at their own houses, and then they eventually were like, we should bring this to LA. And people were surprised because people didn't know that there were Italians in LA, even though I will clarify there is a huge Italian community in LA. It's a different generation. Downtown LA, there was a Little Italy over 100 years ago. There's an Italian church. There are Italian immigrants. So we do have an Italian community here. And that's what we tapped into, as well as the Italian Americans that didn't have any roots here in LA, but they were from everywhere else, but they still remembered what it was like to be part of their family as Italians. So they started the Feast of San Gennaro in 2002. They brought in Frankie Compitelli, who has Frankie's on Melrose, and he actually grew up in New York, had his own food booth as a kid on Mulberry Street. So he was like perfect. They found the only Catholic priest that was from Naples, Italy, which is where San Gennaro is from and based. And Father Antonio, Monsignor Antonio, became a consultant on the San Gennaro feast. And they brought, it's like, because it wasn't just going to be a party. It was about, this has to be, we know what it was like in New York, and we want it to be authentic. We want there to be Saint Gennaro. We want to include everyone. You don't have to just be Catholic to be a part of this. We want to include the whole community, and we want to let Los Angeles know what it's like to come to an Italian dinner. Because if you're not familiar, you're welcome. And that's what the whole point of the Feast of San Gennaro was. And so many people were involved. We got so many organizations started out of that have grown from there, which is wonderful. And it went on for 15 years. So it was at 3 different locations. And we had a wonderful sponsor. Galbani Cheese was our main sponsor. And just like everything else, they were smart. They made the Feast of San Gennaro a foundation. So all the money that was raised did not go into anyone's pockets. It went to our charities, and it was all about feeding and helping families in need. And that was one of the most brilliant things that I could say about our Feast of San Gennaro here, is there was no monkey business that, people like to associate with Italians. No, it was straight up, honest. Money went to people who were in need, and I could not be more proud to have been a part of it. So I started out as a volunteer, and I eventually started helping to produce it and get it going for like 10 years. And unfortunately, we only stopped it because our sponsors, it costs a lot of money to put on events, especially when you're a charity, and a lot of people put in their own money. But to keep it sustained, the land in LA is hard to acquire for something of that magnitude, and it just costs a lot if you're not trying to be on a studio budget. So unfortunately, we had to stop it when we did, but there's still always a love and a need. So we hope that it can maybe revitalize, but different. And that's one of the points is when San Gennaro first came over from Naples, Italy to New York, it was different. Then when it came from New York to LA, it was different. So maybe there's going to be a next generation of an Italian American or someone who loves what we did, and we'll do Feast of San Gennaro again. They'll just do it a little different, but just keep the authenticity, keep the culture. That was very important to us. Keep the culture. We had genealogy booth. People trace their history. It was yes, it was about culture. It wasn't just a party. It was music, entertainment. We had a procession of Saint Gennaro on Hollywood Boulevard, which no other saint. Hollywood Boulevard is all about premieres in Hollywood. We actually had a procession of a saint, and he was on Hollywood Boulevard. So it was a beautiful, genuine event. Very proud to have been a part of it.
Yeah, this is why I think people want to bring it back. The memories from what you all did for the San Gennaro in LA, it just continues. So you heard Anne. It could come back. We just don't know in what form, right? The door is not closed to San Gennaro Feast in Los Angeles Part 2. So stay tuned. Right? You never know.
Yeah.
So, okay, Anne, what a wonderful conversation we've had about you, your life, the event planning. So you also do a lot of events planning. What was your latest issue? What did you do?
Well, it's funny. Feast of San Gennaro was the big one that started it. And from there, I actually started doing other big community events. I ran the ice rink in downtown Santa Monica for 10 years. And out of that, I created my own business, a pop-up roller rink, which is called Pop Skate. And that's what I'm doing now. I bring pop-up roller rinks all over Los Angeles, California, and we bring the roller rinks to people because it's another fun activity that includes everyone. And I think the through line, I think this is all connected to being Italian because it's all about doing things that people feel welcome and a part of. So that's what I do in my events. So those are some of the big ones. And now with the War of Roses, I'm hoping that this is a little bit more of a serious topic, but it's still a big event. It's our country. It's our vote. So maybe there'll be a way that we bring this to more people as well.
Yeah, and in the lobby, you're also going to have a get out the vote, right?
Yes.
So people can go ahead, tell us about that.
Thank you. There's obviously there's an election in Los Angeles. If you don't know, March 5th. It's not the only election. There's elections all the time, but this was very important for us to do a get out the vote. So we are having, if you haven't yet, we have information on how to register to vote. We will have that in the lobby. And we are going to be supporting voting rights and women's organizations. So a part of the proceeds from this show is going to go to support. We have the League of Women Voters, National Organization for Women, LA Women's Collective, Women's March, Planned Parenthood, Postcards to Voters, ERA Coalition, Rock the Vote. Let me see if I got anyone. I think I got everyone. Yeah, we got everyone. National Organization One. And the cool thing is, I'm going to show you. So if you come to the show, not only will you get one of these nifty things that I'm wearing, the Rock the Vote with a flower, everyone gets one of those, but we will also be giving away these register, show up, vote fun bags. So come to the show, you get a giveaway. We like giving things away. So we have those as well until we run out, but we have enough for mostly everyone. So yes, we're encouraging people learn about what the suffragists did, continue it in your life, and if nothing else, just register and vote. If that's the smallest thing you do from this, just do that. Just pay attention. Just vote. That's the purpose of the whole reason we're bringing the show, and why we're combining it with the Get Out the Vote event. So if you're not sure how or what these organizations are, there's more information on our website, and we're just out there to help the next generation have a great life. So thank you.
And women, please get more involved in politics and run for office. Yes. We've done a great job with women running for office. We need to get more. We need to get more in there. And hey, Anne, how can I get one of those sashes?
I will have one for you. I will have it all wrapped up and sent to you. Absolutely.
Anyway, Anne Potenza, you are a doll. You are a delight. Thank you for bringing this play to life. The War of Roses, the women, the voices, the vote at the historical El Portal Theater on March 1st and March 2nd. Get your tickets, and I hope to see you there. I can't wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you. Thank you, Deborah. This is so important. Thank you so much for helping us get the word out. This is wonderful. What you do is fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend. And please, you can hear and watch our interview with Anne Potenza on my podcast, the Little Italy podcast, and also Deborah Kobylt live. There's a video version. There's an audio version. You can find them anywhere from YouTube to iHeartRadio to Apple Podcasts, anywhere, also Facebook. Just put in my name and put in the name of the podcast, and you'll find us. And of course, Anne Potenza. So we very much look forward to seeing you at the theater. Make sure you sign up to vote, rock the vote, and we'll see you all later.